The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I have a story about the depravity of the American food scene. Now, vending machines might be able to dispense hot pizza. I've actually heard of this before, and I've seen it in some other countries, but Pizza Touch is now testing 3 different pizza vending machines at Florida gas stations, 2 in Orlando and 1 in Lakeland. Wayne Anderson tried it earlier this week and said, I think it's kind of neat. I saw the machine up here the other day, so I decided to try it. You can put cash into the vending machine. You can swipe your credit card. And for $6, you get a personal-sized pizza available in margarita, mushroom, or the ever-popular 4-cheese pizza. They are pre-made and individually wrapped, but baked inside the vending machine. And within 2 minutes, the pizza's ready to eat. I just read a very long article about the intermediate pizza movement in the United States. So you've got at the very low end, you've got stuff like Domino's and Pizza Hut. And then at the high end, you have stuff like local restaurants that just make nice pizza. And there's sort of a niche market opening up in the middle for places that can do the thin crust, quick cooking pizzas. That's an element here. They're priced between something like a Domino's $5 medium pizza and a more expensive pizza you would get at a restaurant. But the idea is that they're heavily customizable and that you can really use the Subway restaurant style conveyor belt construction line idea to customize your pizza and to get it into the oven. That I'm more interested in. The vending machine pizzas, I have to tell you, are not very appealing to me. Now, I know, Pat, being a vegan, this might be a whole different story for you. I don't know if they have vegan cheese options in these, but if they did, does this sound like something you would want to try?
No, not at all. And you go into like the different echelons, I guess, of pizza chains, or not just pizza chains, but pizza restaurants.
Right.
On the top, you have, the nice sit-down Italian restaurants. Then you have Domino's and Papagino's.
Yeah.
Way at the bottom are the gas station pizzas, right? So if it's coming from a vending machine too, I don't want to go anywhere near that.
Yeah. There are convenience stores in Boston and in New York City where places like to cover a lot of ground that will say, hey, we've got a deli here. It's a convenience store, but you can also get pizza and subs. And it's pretty bad, right? And I can only imagine that vending machine pizza is even below that. I know, Rachel, you're very keyed in to everything from the quality of the source ingredients to chemicals and preservatives, et cetera. Are there any circumstances where you would try a vending machine pizza?
It's funny that you say that, yeah, because the first thing that popped into my mind when I was thinking about this story is the immense amount of preservatives that would have to go into a product like this to ensure the feasibility of consumption, so to speak, aka that it is edible. I understand that this definitely is, as you said, kind of a niche market, and I know that on college campuses, I can definitely envision this being very successful. However, I will not be participating in it, but I hope that everyone else who does enjoys it. Yeah,
with peace and love, if you are into the vending machine pizza, by all means, have at it. But it's something about it is a little bit scary to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are other countries that are known for having vending machines for much more complex foods than you would think could come out of a vending machine. And yeah, I think the preservatives would be the big issue for me, because you just don't know, unless you're removing and re-adding new pizzas every day. They need to have some kind of chemicals unless you're keeping them frozen. But then I don't know that you'd be able to go from frozen to completely warm and ready to go in the 2 minutes they promise. I don't know.
Right. That's kind of also why I'm just thinking about in terms of the temperature and ensuring that this isn't a kind of a microbial breeding ground for bacteria. I worry.
Yeah. Pat?
So I go to Fenway Park pretty often, and they, for a long time, have had these vending machines that distribute kosher hot dogs.
Right.
So I think this technology has been in the works for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
I've never seen anyone use it, though.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Well, we will keep an eye on vending machine pizza. There's a Japanese inventor who's hoping that a robot that still needs humans will win over Asia's largest tech fair, offering a counterpoint to major tech firms that are pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence. We're talking about Katsumori Sakakibara, who was showing off his droid called Kaiba at the Cutting Edge IT and Electronics Comprehensive Exhibition, which kicked off a couple of days ago near Tokyo. This is a waist-high droid-style robot whose name means hippocampus, which is a key area of the brain in Japanese. It's controlled by a human wearing a virtual reality handset and mechanical arms. So if the person waves their arms, the robot follows suit by waving arms. But whatever the robot can only do what the human controlling it tells it to do. This is interesting, and I have really mixed feelings about the future of robotics because, first of all, there's like a big, broader discussion in robotics about if we're going the direction of sort of human service robots that might be able to do tasks in your house or whatever else. There are some who really want the humanoid robot of science fiction lore that looks and acts much more like a human than your vacuum cleaner does, right? And then there's another view that's, no, we really shouldn't be going in the direction of humanoid style robots because they are not humans. And if they look like humans and if they occupy space in our minds and vision that is similar to what a human looks like, we are going to start humanizing them in a way that doesn't really make sense because ultimately these are machines that we've built that are here to serve us or to accomplish some task. Do you have strong feelings, Rachel, about the humanoid robot movement versus the non-humanoid robot movement?
Well, I think adding the human factor, unfortunately, for many people is kind of viewed as taking a step back when we already have things, technology like Google's DeepMind or certain drones that are able to navigate obstacles in a field and things of that nature. So I feel like for a lot of people, they kind of think that component is unnecessary because what they want to move towards is having completely autonomous robots and vehicles and drones and things of that nature. So I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think in terms of developing technology, there is going to be something that you can learn when you are including that human factor that is going to be void when you are only looking at autonomy. But I do think it is, it can be frightening, but it's already happening.
I think that the humanoid style robot makes sense to me insofar as the human locomotion is not the most logical design for certain tasks. Legs, for example, are very different than if you saw the new Star Wars, the sort of the droid that is one sphere on top of another one, and the sphere can just roll. That's more efficient than the way that humans walk on 2 feet in many ways. So would you design a robot with human legs? Well, what about going upstairs or down? I don't know. Like you could sort of have a debate over some specific mechanical issues of humanoid versus non-humanoid robots. If the idea is that in the future, robots are going to be doing some of the tasks in our homes that we are used to people doing now, I sort of see the humanoid direction as a natural direction to increase comfort for a machine doing certain things. So I don't know. I mean, we're getting really specific here, but if you imagine robotic cooking, you could devise a kitchen that is just magnets and cradles and arms that are disconnected and hanging from the ceiling that can move plates and ingredients around and cook a meal for you. But you could also imagine a kitchen that is exactly the way your kitchen is today, but you have a humanoid robot which has arms and legs and moves around your kitchen and does the cutting and prepares the meal. Isn't there on some level some way in which the humanoid robot preparing the meal in the way you're used to seeing a human do it is more comforting than just arms hanging from the ceiling manipulating ingredients?
Well, I think in any case, if you're seeing arms kind of hanging from a ceiling, manipulating ingredients, it's going to be slightly disheartening.
Yeah.
However, for some people that actually, as I was kind of saying before, but I think I was speaking before more about having a human control the technology versus the humanoid aesthetics, so to speak, in a robot. However, with the humanoid robot, I do think that for some people, having that layer with a face and eyes is actually kind of almost more disheartening because, as you were saying before, it's a little bit too close to home for them, whereas opposed to if you can kind of separate the parts from the human, it makes it, I don't know, 1 degree of separation.
I could really see it either way. I think there's arguments to be made in both directions. And realistically, we're going to see both humanoid and non-humanoid type robots develop over time. One other story I want to mention. We've talked a lot about trigger words and campus safe spaces, etc. Student leaders of this year's freshman orientation at James Madison University were handed a list of 35 things that they should avoid saying. This includes phrases like, "you have such a pretty face," "love the sinner, hate the sin," "we're all part of the human race," "I treat all people the same," "it was only a joke," "I never owned slaves," and "people just need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps," among a bunch of other expressions. And as the list claims, these phrases and others, quote, "widen the diversity gap," and 2, quote, "don't create a safe and inclusive environment." You know, I'm really starting to have a problem with the idea that college students need to be protected and coddled above all else. Now, I get there's 2 sides on this that I respect, right? So on the one side, you often hear, listen, we need to, in higher learning institutions, set some ground rules to make it clear that being offensive for the sake of being offensive is just not going to be tolerated. And I completely agree with that. The other side says you are not going to college to be given the impression that everything in life is going to be completely comfortable, easy, pleasing, and that you are never going to be encountering things that make you uncomfortable. And part of college is to also learn how to deal with people that you may not agree with. In jobs, this is a common thing. And that resonates with me as well. And so for me, some of these lists, while I understand the underlying objective of saying it's good for people to be aware of ways in which, without them even realizing it, they may be making someone else feel rejected, insulted, or offended. I think that that's a worthy goal. But to be micromanaging language in this way, particularly with something like "it was only a joke," and saying that's an offensive phrase you should avoid, "it was only a joke," to me, this is hugely problematic. I know, Rachel, you and Pat were in college more recently than I was, so I don't know if something has changed on campuses that makes this type of list really necessary, but I'm very much against this. I don't know about you.
I mean, I've kind of made the point before that I definitely agree that college is a time to learn about dealing with different personalities and situations that make you uncomfortable. And it kind of reminds me of the trying to avoid the parent who shields their child from everything that is bad in the world, and then they are kind of unequipped to handle certain situations that come up that are outside of their frame of reference, so to speak.
Yeah.
However, I think it's hard because it's kind of subjective to try and come up with a measure of when a certain word within this repertoire is actually a threat to someone's safety, or as opposed to it is emotionally disturbing them. So I feel like there's a lot of gray area there.
And that's the argument a lot of people make, which is the entire college campus should really be a safe space for free thought, expression, and exploration. And if we can really tie a statement or phrase to physical danger in some way, that's one thing. But the idea that we should exclude even references to certain ideas or phrases, I find it very problematic. And I know every time we talk about this, there's a few people who say, David, you don't understand that a trauma survivor will be triggered by certain things. I would argue you cannot possibly predict what would trigger every single trauma survivor, and just picking 30 or 20 or 35 things, it to me seems like a sort of distraction. Pat, when you were in school more recently than I was, did you experience anything related to words that should not be said, this type of safe space, offended type of world?
There was never anything explicitly said that you can't say certain words, but I did have one classmate who insisted on being called by Z and Zer, like gender-neutral pronouns.
Yeah.
And it was just something that the professor especially was not used to,
right,
and wasn't really able to adjust. So it kind of came off as he was being offensive to it.
It appeared as though the professor was being offensive because the professor wasn't able to just use the pronouns that were being requested, you're saying?
He refused to go along with it.
Correct. Oh, he flat out refused?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He just didn't want to do it.
Were there any repercussions for that?
No, it didn't go anywhere else.
Interesting. And within the classroom, did the professor refer to the student as What words did the professor use?
He would repeatedly say she and her, and you could tell it got on this person's nerves quite a bit.
It did. And was it ever mentioned again that, by the way, I expect these other pronouns to be used? Or was it just like once it became clear the professor wasn't doing it, that was it?
Repeatedly, it was the point was made that this person insisted on being called by these gender neutral pronouns.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, if you have stories we should know about related to this, by all means, send them in. That's it for today. We are off on Monday for Columbus Day. We will be back on Tuesday with debate coverage and analysis.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.